This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everyone. The levels of addiction in our country has escalated since COVID. And many people are working on that, trying to get over that and recover. What does recovery look like? And why is so much stress connected to it? We're going to dig into that today. He is a licensed addiction therapist and owner of Stress Free Recovery, based out of Baltimore. James Martinez is on the program once again. How are you doing today?
Steve, thank you for having me back.
Great to have you here. So important that we dig into this. And for all sides, somebody that is maybe facing recovery or somebody walking that journey with a loved one. And you built a practice that focuses on all aspects of the recovery, stress being one of them. Where does the stress come from? Is it the pressure that somebody puts upon themselves, knowing they need to get this done, but it's not easy?
Well, when people think of recovery, they automatically think of addiction,
Sure.
and when we think of addiction, we sort of like automatically think about the negativity of the consequences and how it affects us.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that it's a domino effect. If someone is having some type of alcohol or drug problem or a behavioral addiction like gambling, the consequences might be that affects their health, their finances, relationships with loved one. And that in itself, the addiction in itself is the stress part. Now, recovery is really more about getting that individual that's feeling all that stress to a healthy state. Because right now, whatever behavior that they're doing is considered unhealthy. And when you're engaged in that unhealthy lifestyle, you know, uh, naturally you have medical problems, you have psychological problems, you might feel lost, burnout, and just chronic stress, especially if you don't know what is the correct path that a person needs to do in order to make this recovery journey. Now, what does recovery look like is that, recovery is more about trying to help the individual become more self-aware. Because in the addiction, you're an autopilot. You started off innocently, usually sort of like an activity that's starting to feel pleasurable, releasing a lot of dopamine, neuroplasticity. But then the activity starts to become more like autopilot. And if you're trying to recover from it, part of that is learning to change your thinking, but also learning how to be honest with yourself. Starting to recognize, hey, this particular thing that I'm doing is causing problems to myself, to my loved ones, and I need to become honest in recognizing what are my personal triggers as well, and what is my journey. So when you're stressed, you're in that constant fight or flight mode. That adrenaline, that cortisol, and then the body doesn't know when to relax.
Mm.
And recovery, especially in the early stages, can be heavily stressful because most individuals, especially family, those impacted by the addicted one, will always seem to think that recovery is linear. So, hey, you went to treatment, so now he should be better. But when the individual is actually trying to work on change, but the family member doesn't see that immediate change, the family member might actually cause more stress on the person trying to recover because they may still think that, well, I don't trust him. Is he still doing this activity behind my back?
There's stress right there for the person that's recovering.
Yes.
Major.
And sometimes that stress from the family member who actually wants the person to recover, but still doesn't trust them, actually may encourage the individual, if he's not honest with himself, to go back out and use. Well, if they're just going to fight with me and they think I'm using, I might as well just go out and use.
Yep. Yeah, just what you're saying. I know someone connected to someone through someone else, and just the situation you're describing, where he got recovered. He went through recovery, took a job in another state, and that's kind of, his occupation. And his wife, family thinking, well, what's going on? We don't see him for 4 days, and he may be fine. And I believe just what you're saying, and I don't know the full story, but I believe the pressure of that got to him to the point where he made a phone call and his wife drove for hours and picked him up and brought him home. I think it was the stress and the pressure, just very much similar to what you're describing. And this was literally 2 months ago. This took place. And he was in a treatment center for at least a month, prior to all of this, and looked like things were getting better. He's back at the job now again. But I think it's the stress, just what you're saying. That's a big part of it. We don't see that on the other side.
No, but I'm glad you pointed that out because when we're in our active addiction, we sometimes have the misconception that we're only affecting ourselves. But we go to a rehab, like the gentleman that you described. They go out for 30 days to try to change their thinking and all that. But guess what? The family member generally is not getting any help for their stress.
True.
Or their way of thinking. So now the individual comes home, and in many cases they'll come home thinking, well, oh, everything's going to be great now. In fact, they may even throw a party for me when I get back. And when they come back home, they still feel animosity from the family members.
Yep.
And the thoughts start to cross the individual mind. Well, why did I do this in the first place? Nothing's changed at home. But the reality is something did change, the individual changed, but there's still an unhealthy dynamic at the home. So sometimes in my line of work, we also have to help work with the family members as well. Because when trust is broken down, communication is broken, and sometimes the person that's in recovery doesn't know what he needs to do to regain that trust back. The person could be going to AA meetings, for example, 6, 7, 8 months. The family member still doesn't trust them because the family member is still remembering that emotional connection to the past, the negativity. And they still have that fear that the person may just go back. So then part of working with family members is opening up that communication so then trust can be developed, and then there's some understanding by the affected family member, hey, because it's only fair that if I'm the person in recovery, you don't trust me, what do I need to do to regain your trust? And if I did it, then what's the problem now?
And not to take anything away from the family members, they want the best for the person in recovery. there is stress there, but sometimes it seems like that stress can overpower the person in recovery, and put that pressure on them, not making it any easier.
So interesting enough, chronic stress and addiction play out in the same areas of the brain.
Wow.
Very similar pathways because a lot of this has to do with the reward and the survival, the fight and flight.
Sure.
So when you're stressed, your brain is looking for relief, and if you don't have like the healthy recovery tool, then you're looking for the quick fix, which is whatever their addiction of choice is.
Yep.
And sometimes uh, they may decide, well, I don't want to drink again, but let's say they go to rehab for drinking, and I'm not going to drink again, but um, they still don't know how to handle a chronic stress, so they pick up a different vice to replace it.
Mm.
Not intentionally, but they sort of develop a second coping skill, because the issue is learning how to really deal with the stress that comes with the recovery, where many people focus on just the recovery and not so much the stress that comes along with it.
So would you say that it is, interesting that what's being revealed here? Would you say that many times stress leads to addiction, and now we have recovery, and there's stress there as well?
Correct.
Wow. Mm. That layers of challenge. You think you're out of it, and now you're right back into it. Um, what would you say in your experience, James, with stress being a major factor in addiction? Like, would you say, and not scientific here, if it's 100%, yes, all addiction connected to stress. It's not. But where would you put that number? What do you think? Again, this is just a guesstimate, but just to have a little bit of a barometer there. What do you think?
I think that's a hard number to actually place, but there's definitely a very strong connection,
Okay.
and the thing about recovery, is that you need to learn how to retrain yourself on how to deal with the stress and emotion. So let's talk about stress in general real quick. So there are usually two triggers for stress. An external trigger, like even for you, in your line of work, an external trigger for stress might be time management, time constraints, if you're not feeling well,
Mm.
something
Tech
external,
issues,
tech
yeah,
issues, so on and so forth.
yeah,
But then there's the internal ones. And so the internal triggers are like a lot has to do with the self-talk. So certain expectations that aren't realistic, either for yourself or someone else,
sure.
or a lot of negative thinking, and you sort of like put yourself down.
And this,
And that,
I don't experience this, but I could imagine that some would. Maybe feeling in what I do, maybe I'm not prepared. I don't think I'm prepared. Your brain is like bouncing all over the place. I'm not really
Mhm.
prepared for this. And you think, well, I'm not going to do as well as I should do because I'm not prepared. And that's a negative monkey chatter, if you will, just all, going around in your head.
I like that term, monkey chatter. I call it the monkey brain sometimes when we have all that self-talk.
Yeah, you know what it was? I was
It
at the
just
zoo. I was at the zoo once. You
jumps
see them, they're
around the
like,
thoughts. Yeah.
if you picture that in your head, it's
Mhm.
like you can't focus on anything else except hearing the monkey chatter.
So there is such a thing as the monkey brain, and the monkey brain is when you're again under stress, your thoughts can just jump from place to place.
Yep.
You're thinking of something, and then now you jumped into something else, and those are a lot of signs of internalized stress.
Yep. 100%. Yeah. And I have to believe we all have it to a level, to a level. Some of
Mhm.
us manage it better, but I believe that we're all, thinking about things all the time and some, a lot of negative thoughts going around.
So in my line of work, we we try to look on trying to help the person manage the stress as well in their recovery process. But in order for them to do that, first they need to be honest with themselves. Even when you go to 12-step fellowship like AA, NA, GA, it's one that are the pillars, to be honest, open, and willing
Hmm.
it to be able to accept. And harping on that is also learning how to connect with other people. In addiction, interesting enough, most addictions start socially, but as it starts to progress, it becomes more and more solitary. So you could be someone that's very social, very outgoing, but as you start to become more and more of a closet drinker, for example, some of your social skills start to become dull. And then you start to have, you come into recovery and we suggest, hey, it would be good if you learn how to connect with people, learn to talk more about your feelings and your thoughts, and that social anxiety fear kicks in because these are skills that they haven't been using for quite some time,
Mm,
even though they have outgoing personalities. So then we have to sort of like help retrain them,
wow.
and then the last piece, naturally, with any recovery program, what's going to help regain that trust, that's going to help relieve that stress, is being consistent.
Mm. I got to tell you, James, I'm seeing the stress aspect of this in a whole different way. Never realized it. Never realized how much stress somebody who is in recovery, even what drove them to addiction, it's big. Had no idea.
So in order to get them to learn to manage the stress, so it may be to get them to learn how to use self-care habits, learn about more about meditation, mindfulness. In other words, learning how to uh, challenge their negative thinking and replace it with a lot of positive affirmations, positive distraction, picking up new hobbies. Um, Because for someone in recovery, even just being alone at home, quiet Sunday afternoon, they're bored. Boredom for them becomes very stressful because in their boredom, they used to go back out and do this. Oh, so they feel out of place. I normally am doing this, but now I can't do this. What do I do now? So
Mm,
there are many aspects of stress in the recovery process. So we try to work with them. And naturally, this is a process. So I always tell individuals that recovery is not a destination. Recovery is really more like a journey,
sure.
and it's a journey of growth, if you want to look at it this way. You know, it's really an opportunity where you can actually become a better person. And even if when you're trying to rebuild that trust, some of the bonds can actually be stronger than before this whole addiction process started.
Wow. There's so many pieces of this that those not involved in it don't see it and realize it, what's going on here. Mm. What what's your advice for somebody? We'll look at it both ways. Somebody who
Uh-huh.
is dealing with addiction, is this is resonating. They're feeling that stress. And even looking at the road to recovery, potentially more stress. What's your advice to them?
So if they're feeling, so let me just make a clarification
Sure.
because some individuals confuse stress with anxiety and so very similar. But stress is really when you're feeling all of that in the moment. And anxiety really is when you're sort of like projecting it in the future.
Gotcha.
And stress can lead to anxiety. Um, but understand that, you know, they didn't get into their situation overnight. They won't get out of it overnight, but there's hope. I always let individuals know, and I don't sugarcoat this, there's some work to be done. Um, because we're talking about change, and some individuals, they get scared of change, you know. Um,
Who does in any situation? Like changes, we're wired to stay the same, consistent because it's safe, right?
right. But the good news is, what I would tell that individual is they don't have to do this by themselves. That's why someone like us are here to try to help them with that journey, to help them develop those tools along those journey. And when challenges come along, because challenges are still going to come along in that transitional phase in your ways you're dealing with environmental triggers with the family, going back to work, maybe trying to uh, regain healthier habits, lifestyle habits, whether it be some exercise, developing spirituality, whatever works for them, because this is not a one size fits all approach. Your journey is tied to your beliefs, who you are, and what might work for, let's say, someone today. Maybe somebody else may have a different approach, may be more beneficial for them. So that is pretty much how long what I do, and that's why one of the things that we also do is, because people eventually go back to work. Let's say like the individual, your friend who did the rehab, I'm sure he had to go back to work at
Yep.
some point. And then you have the regular therapist. Oh, I only work 9 to 5. You need to see me at 3 o'clock. And then the guy is thinking, well, I'm working. I can't stop and all that. So then we offered like the convenient evening and weekend hours for those individuals to take that one other stress trigger off their plate.
When you said that, and that person is asking for help, but has to be at work and knowing, what am I going to do now? I felt that stress. Seriously, like, thank you for making those times available, because there's life that needs to be lived along the way. James, what's the best way for somebody to reach out to you, whether they are struggling or even if it's a family member that wants more information?
They can visit my website, stressfreerecovery.com. There you'll find you can actually request a free consultation, or you can call us directly at 888-517-3268. You can leave a voicemail message, and as soon as I have an opportunity, I will get back to you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. I know your practice is called stressfreerecovery.com. Now I truly understand why, the impact of stress. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me again, Steve.
We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.